let's get to the heart of things here. This how can I question. When I first heard you say that, I was like, that is so fundamental, so simple. I just felt like, wow, we think of 1,000 ways to tell our kids to try harder or to think bigger or to have more confidence, and we never just pose those simple 3 words to them. How could you do it?
Yeah, when I started speaking, I was mostly speaking about myself and about how I climbed El Capitan and I did all these things, and it became a speech of I did this and I did this and I did this, and I really didn't want to talk like that to people. I wanted to give them something to take away. And so I started thinking about my life, and I realized I had been asking myself that question my whole life without actually knowing that I was asking the question. I was coming up with ways to do things, but I wasn't coming up with excuses to not do them. So I remember there's a speaking of hiking, there's a good story about me asking that question one time when I was playing in my parents' driveway, and I saw that we lived in the woods in northern Maine, so there was a lot of woods around my house, and I saw this perfect dirt ramp off the edge of the driveway, and I thought, I wonder if I could get into the woods down that ramp and then see how far I could go. And so I pulled a wheelie and launched into the woods, and I started pushing myself, and then I came to a pile of debris and couldn't get around it, so I hopped out of my wheelchair and crawled and just started pulling my wheelchair behind me, and that was one of the first times I think I had really answered that question is, "How can I do this?" And I didn't tell my mother where I was going either, which was probably a bad idea, but, she never found out, I don't think, that I actually did that. So, I turned around and made my way back, and everything worked out fine, but I think, yeah, really that was the first time I really remember answering that question.
It's just a light bulb moment. I'm not sure I won't be changed forever by just meeting you and having you tell me that. Because we all are facing all kinds of challenges in life, and whether it's a physical challenge or an emotional challenge, um, we can say I can't, or we can say how can I. I just love this fresh approach, and it is so fundamental. But we can make it that a mantra. So, okay, so part of the equation here was your wonderful mother. You have great parents. I love your parents' stories. So please tell us about your parents because they are part of this story. They sound like they had exactly the right sort of personas to nurture somebody as positive and hopeful and helpful as you.
As a person with a disability who was born in a small town, I was the only kid in a wheelchair, and I was really the only person who used a wheelchair that I knew of. So having a mother who was born with retinitis pigmentosa and ended up losing her eyesight, that she was my mentor as a person with a disability. And so I got to see her do quilting, and she made baskets, and she was president of the women's club and president of the Helping Hands organization in town, and she was involved in the co-op and church groups, and she did all these things, and for the most part couldn't really see. She even drove until I was 13 and then decided that was probably not going to be a good idea anymore. So she gave it up, but she really showed me that a person with a disability can do anything if they find a way to do it. And I think she really was my first mentor as that type of person. And then my
And then
dad, of course,
yeah,
yeah,
your dad,
yeah,
he lived by that. How can we?
yeah. So
Right?
my dad got me involved in a lot of things, literally from a baby. So there's a picture of me I have with him on the back of a motorcycle, and I'm in a backpack on his back, and we're just riding the motorcycle with me strapped to his back. But then, as I got bigger, he got a car seat to go on the back, and then I got even bigger, and he bought a sidecar. So I never stopped riding the motorcycle with him. He always found a way to keep that going, and then he would take me hunting and fishing and all the things that dads do with their kids. And there really was no question that I was not going to do those things.
Hmm. Yeah, and I do have to say my husband's family was the same way with his sister. They refused to give her driver's ed at the high school, and they found a way. It was a how can I environment, and I think that's number one. This fresh idea that you're bringing to spaces. I'm sure you probably do public speaking and consulting that opens up whole new landscapes that people haven't even considered.
Yeah, over the past 4 years, I've been working with land trusts and various land managers to make outdoor spaces more accessible. And I always find that when the employees of these organizations go out with me on trails, there's a lot of aha moments where they see things that they didn't realize were obstacles for people, or they see it. I sometimes will take a different path because I can't get through on a certain trail, and they'll realize, well, going that way would have been better for the trail. And so there's all these little things they get to see that they wouldn't necessarily get to see if they weren't out there with me. And it sort of teaches them that sometimes a certain path might not work, but you can always find a different path.
Well, and I think there's something you have this wonderful way. I'm scrolling through my notes where you're not asking us to pave the forest. You've got this really lovely thing that you say about accessibility.
So I think everyone deserves choices, just like everyone else in the world. And so I don't necessarily advocate for perfectly accessible trails because not everyone wants a perfect path. We do need them, definitely, but we only need them where a lot of people go. We don't necessarily need them in the middle of the wilderness or up a mountain or where people are normally going to be challenged anyway. But people like tourist attractions or different places on the coast of Maine and things like that are where we do need those places, because if thousands of people are going there, then everyone should be able to go there. And so I advocate for improving access, but not necessarily making it perfect, because I honestly I don't like accessible trails. They're kind of boring, and so I like a bit of a challenge. And so I like the trails that are still doable, but not necessarily accessible.
Right. So, and isn't that the same for all of us?
Right,
If it was just a walk in the park, we'd go to the park.
right.
We're wanting to have a little bit of stress and a little bit of strain and have some intellectual challenges about how to get over this or do that. So it just offers that same kind of stimulation and challenge to everyone. So I love your attitude there. Also, because I think people often get overwhelmed and, they think they immediately shoot to the edge of the universe with what has to be done. But you have a great rap about just taking things in stages too.
Yeah, when I'm advocating for different improvements on trails, I like to show people the little things they can do to make a big difference. So if you start doing a lot of little things, eventually it becomes a big thing. And you can pick away at things. You don't necessarily have to go to the ADA standard immediately, because first of all, that's very costly, and it can turn a few $1,000s into $100,000. So if you just start picking away at maybe removing rocks, or covering up some roots, or widening the trail, or laying down a different surface, or putting a few benches, you can do any one of those things and just do that one thing this year. And the next year, do the next thing. And eventually you have a really improved access trail. And so that's really what I try to stress to people is you don't need to go 0 to 100. You can go 0 to 10 and then do another 10 and another 10.